The point here isn't to just poke fun at some people who misused analytics and fell into a pretty common trap. There's a bigger point here. These are seasoned, experienced, successful, well-credentialed business leaders, and they still fell into this trap. Now, imagine what we're doing today when we are putting information, these dashboards, in front of frontline managers who are not as well-credentialed, not as experienced, and saying, now you have better, quicker information. Go make better, quicker decisions. In many cases, it's a recipe for disaster. Why is that? Well, because when people look at dashboards, they tend to assume three things. They assume that the data that they're looking at are correct, that they're important, and that they are actionable. And we have to be careful of those assumptions. For everybody in here who uses or builds dashboards, I don't want you making those assumptions. I want you turning those into questions. I want you asking the question, are the data that you're looking at correct? That's a data governance issue. I don't tend to talk too much about that. IBM has some interesting stuff to say on that, and I'll leave that to them. Are the data important? And then my area of expertise, are they actionable? That really gets to the crux of good business decision making. I want you asking those questions, not making those assumptions. Now, sometimes when I share this example with people, they will say to me, okay, look, I get it. It's a funny example, but we don't use dashboards and visualizations to do something as complicated as assess the effectiveness of online advertising. It's actually a hard thing to do. They say, we just use it as a diagnostic. Mark talked about diagnostics. We just use it as a diagnostic. We take our temperature, make sure there are no red flags that we have to address and intervene in some way. But that doesn't exempt people from these dangers that I'm talking about here. A few months ago, I was working with a company that makes very large-scale construction equipment, like hydraulic excavators. You can see one of them here behind me. And one of their big picture goals was to maximize market share in all of their excavator product segments. So they had about 25 different excavators, from relatively small, only about 10 horsepower, all the way to very large, about 250 horsepower. So there's a division manager who had responsibility for the excavator line, and he built himself and his team a dashboard so they could track a bunch of measures, including market share for the excavator product segments. And every day he'd go into his office and he would see something that looked a little bit like this. So let me just walk you through this here briefly. They had 5 different excavator product segments. There was the mini, small, medium, large, and heavy duty. And you can see how they're broken out here. So the mini was the excavators from 0 to 50 horsepower, small from 51 to 100, and so forth. And every day he walked in and he would see those dials in the green. Now the green represented at least 40% market share. That was their goal. And the yellow was a little bit less than that, and of course the red was bad. So he's feeling pretty good. He's walking in every day and seeing those dials squarely in the green, and then quickly things change. And one day he walks into his office and he looks at his dashboard and he sees this. And if you didn't quite catch it, check out that medium segment. It's gone from a pretty strong green to a deep red. But he is not concerned because he knows exactly what's happened. It's a pretty reasonable story, actually. It turns out that 2 of their best-selling excavators that had been in the medium segment had been re-engineered. And their specifications changed a little bit, and their horsepower changed such that it moved those 2 best sellers out of the medium segment. One had been pushed into the small and one had been pushed into the large. But he appreciates what I'm sure you do too, and that is that absolutely no underlying business outcomes have changed. Still the same top line, market share, everything is exactly the same, so he continues on with work as usual. And then in comes the head of marketing, who says, hey, what's going on? I saw the dashboard. What's going on in that medium segment? We've got a problem. And the division manager says, hold on, don't worry about it. It's probably not what you think. And he explains to the head of marketing what I've just explained to you here. And the head of marketing says, got it, thanks. But we still can't live with red on the dashboard. And so the head of marketing pushes forward an initiative, hundreds of man-hours, tens of thousands of dollars in consultants' fees to, and their words, not mine, to turn this crisis into an opportunity and to innovate in this newly found white space. Now, let me be totally fair. I don't know which was the right reaction. I actually can't tell you whether it was more appropriate to be celebratory and high-fiving and giving out bonuses when all those dials were in green, or if it was more appropriate to problem solve and spend some resources trying to solve for a problem once one of them went into red. You can actually make an argument for both of them. But what I know is this, that they cannot both be correct. See, I have never seen a better example, me personally, I've never seen a better example of how the aesthetic elements of a dashboard can drive important business decision-making. And that's what I want to warn you about. I don't want you, I don't want your clients, I don't want you making your important business decisions based on those arbitrary design elements of a dashboard. I want your most important business decisions driven by your most important business outcomes and your most important business priorities. See, part of the concern that I have is that dashboards compel action. That's why we build them, right? We want to inform good decision-making. But if we are not careful, we compel action in ways that don't match those most important outcomes and our priorities. This always reminds me of a quote from one of my favorite movies, Jurassic Park. You've got the eccentric billionaire on the left who's founded this theme park, building clone dinosaurs. And on the right, you've got this skeptical mathematician who's visiting the park. And he thinks maybe dinosaurs and humans on the same island aren't such a great idea. You probably know which one of them ends up being correct. And the billionaire, frustrated with the level of skepticism from the mathematician, says, I don't think you're giving us our due credit. Our scientists have done things that nobody has done before. And the mathematician says, yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether you could that they didn't stop to think whether they should. That sums up what I am seeing a lot in industry these days. It is so easy for us with IoT, Internet of Things, cheap sensors. It is so easy for us to collect, aggregate, analyze, visualize, and push out data at frontline managers that we are sometimes not stopping to think whether we are actually bringing about good decision-making.